The theater was buzzing with anticipation, but no one expected the boy who rolled onto the stage that night. The spotlight followed a frail figure in a battered wheelchair, his oversized shirt hanging loosely on his small frame. His eyes, however, told a different story, not of weakness, but of determination. This was Miguel, a 14-year-old from the crowded streets of Manila, where every day was a fight for survival. Before this moment, Miguel's life had been anything but glamorous. He grew up singing on busy street corners, hoping spare change from strangers would buy him and his little sister their next meal. Rain or shine, his voice carried through jeepney-filled roads and market alleys, a sound of hope against the chaos. Most people passed by without a glance, but a few stopped long enough to marvel at the soulful depth of a boy who had seen too much, too soon. His wheelchair wasn't a choice, a tragic accident years earlier left him unable to walk. Yet, instead of silencing him, the pain seemed to sharpen his gift. Music became his way of fighting back against the world that tried to break him. And now, here he was, staring at the largest stage of his life, America's Got Talent. The judges whispered among themselves, unsure of what to expect from a boy who looked as fragile as glass. The audience grew still. Miguel adjusted the microphone, his trembling hands betraying his nerves. Then, without warning, he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let the first note escape his lips, a sound so haunting and pure that the entire room gasped in unison. Something extraordinary had just begun. The first notes hung in the air like fragile glass, shimmering and unbroken. Miguel's voice poured through the theater, each word carrying the weight of a life carved out on the streets. The audience leaned in closer, some wiping tears before they even realized they were crying. For Miguel, it was as if the world had finally gone silent, listening only to him. On the judges' panel, Simon Cowell shifted forward in his seat. Known for his sharp tongue and ruthless honesty, Simon rarely showed emotion so quickly. But now, his eyes narrowed, not in doubt, but in astonishment. "Where has this boy been hiding?" he whispered under his breath, caught off guard by the raw beauty of the performance. Miguel, unaware of the reaction he was creating, was lost in the song. For a moment, he wasn't the boy begging for coins at traffic lights or wheeling himself through uneven alleys. He was a singer, a star, filling one of the world's biggest stages with a voice that felt heaven-sent. The contrast could not have been sharper. Just days earlier, Miguel had been singing under a flickering street lamp, ignored by hurried strangers clutching their bags of groceries. Now, he was face to face with one of the most powerful figures in the music industry, a man who had shaped careers and crushed dreams with a single word. The final note lingered, trembling in the stillness. Miguel lowered the microphone, his chest rising and falling as though he had just given away a piece of his soul. The audience erupted into thunderous applause, but Miguel sat frozen, unsure if this was all real. Simon Cowell leaned forward, his hand hovering over the golden buzzer. The boy's life was about to change forever. The applause thundered across the theater, but not everyone believed. A few voices in the audience muttered skeptically, their doubts carried just loud enough to sting, "It's just a sympathy vote, they only feel sorry for him." Others rolled their eyes, whispering that the boy in the wheelchair couldn't possibly survive beyond this one lucky moment. Miguel heard the whispers. Though the crowd was cheering, those words pierced him like knives. His hands tightened on the armrests of his wheelchair, and for a heartbeat, the old memories came rushing back, the kids in his neighborhood who mocked him, the employers who refused to let him sing in restaurants because of his appearance, the strangers who looked away as though he didn't exist. Simon's gaze never wavered, but Miguel's heart pounded. He feared that if the judges saw him as weak, this stage, his only chance, would vanish in an instant. Then, something shifted. Instead of shrinking under the weight of doubt, Miguel lifted the microphone again. His voice rose higher, fuller, defying the disbelief around him. This time, he didn't just sing, he commanded the room. Every lyric carried fire, every note carried defiance. It was no longer just music, it was a declaration, "I am more than my wheelchair. I am more than your pity." The audience fell silent, then leaned forward, drawn in by the sheer force of his spirit. Even the skeptics lowered their eyes, ashamed of their doubts. His song soared to a climax, raw and powerful, echoing through every corner of the theater. When he stopped, the silence was deafening. Then came the standing ovation. Judges who moments earlier looked unsure now stared at him with wide-eyed curiosity, as if they had just witnessed something they couldn't explain. Miguel wasn't a street boy anymore. He was a phenomenon. The stage lights dimmed, and for a moment, Miguel felt swallowed by the weight of silence. His chest tightened. This was it, the moment that would either shatter his dream or make it soar. He could feel thousands of eyes on him, waiting to see if a boy from the streets, bound to a wheelchair, truly belonged among stars. His palms were slick with sweat as he adjusted the microphone once more. Doubts clawed at his mind. What if I fail? What if they were right, that I'm just a charity case, not a singer? His voice almost faltered before the first note. He closed his eyes, remembering his sister's face, the little girl who always believed in him, who told him, "Kuya, when you sing, the world listens." The fear cracked, replaced by something fiercer. Miguel inhaled deeply, and when he opened his mouth, a sound erupted that no one in the theater would ever forget. It was stronger, braver, and more breathtaking than anything he had sung before. His voice soared like it had been waiting all his life for this very stage. The notes climbed higher, trembling with raw emotion, then plunged into depths filled with soul and pain. Every lyric told the story of his struggles, nights of hunger, years of being overlooked, dreams nearly crushed by life's cruelty. But woven into it all was defiance, a promise that he would not be silenced. By the final chorus, the entire crowd was on their feet, clapping in rhythm, their cheers lifting him higher. Miguel's last note rang out, echoing like thunder in a storm, unshakable, undeniable. When the music stopped, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Miguel had not just sung, he had conquered. The last note faded, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed frozen. Then, in a moment that would replay across millions of screens, Simon Cowell slammed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained down, sparkling like pieces of heaven falling just for Miguel. The boy covered his face, tears slipping through his trembling fingers. For the first time, he wasn't just a street singer in a broken wheelchair, he was a star, chosen, celebrated, and embraced by the world. The audience roared, some standing on chairs, others crying openly. The judges rose to their feet, applauding with genuine awe. Even Simon, notorious for his stern critiques, leaned forward and said with rare softness, "Miguel, you didn't just sing, you told the world your story. And it's unforgettable." Backstage, the crew rushed to embrace him, and cameras captured every tearful smile. Within hours, his performance spread online, inspiring millions. Messages poured in from across the globe, from children who also faced hardships, from parents who saw hope in his strength, from strangers who simply wrote, "Thank you for reminding us what courage looks like." Miguel's life began to shift. No longer would he will himself through dark alleys, singing for coins. Now, he was invited to stages where his voice could heal and inspire. Yet, through it all, he never forgot the streets where it all began, nor the little sister who had whispered faith into his heart. As he looked up at the falling confetti, Miguel smiled through his tears. Once, he was just a boy singing under a street lamp, ignored by the world. Now, the world was listening. And for the first time, he believed, dreams, no matter how impossible, could truly fly.